As we have a wonderful time clock just in front of me, I can wait until 10 o'clock sharp to open this session, which is the case. Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Inka Eberhardt will defend the academic thesis, Fields of Gold, Financial Decision-Making in the Wild. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Prorector, members of the Corona, colleagues, family and friends, it's a great pleasure to be finally able to present my PhD dissertation, Fields of Gold, Financial Decision-Making in the Wild. The title, Fields of Gold, relates to two concepts, broadly speaking. So gold is, of course, a hint to finance and, financial decision-making, because I'm looking at two different fields of financial decision-making. Gold together with fields implies to me that research and looking at actual behavior and using field experiments and all that really is a gold mine for research and researchers who are interested in behavior and how people make decisions. So why is looking at actual behavior really important? Well, it also impacts how we think about our assumptions and about our models of decision making. So for example, a couple of decades ago, the neoclassical economists really thought of the Homo economicus as the main decision maker, and the Homo economicus is basically a person that's rational, all-knowing, and mainly self-centered or only interested in their own self and well-being. But of course, with the entrance of psychology into economics and also looking at actual behavior, behavioral economics started really going off, and we found that a lot of these assumptions are wrong. So I listed here some of the examples that relate to my two topics of interest in my dissertation. One is retirement behavior and decision-making. So for example, most people prefer to spend now rather than saving for the retirement, leading to big gaps in income at retirement. Related to that, a lot of people also prefer to engage in fun activities. So probably most of you would agree that it's a lot more fun to read a postcard from your friend from holidays than to open up a letter from your pension fund and read that. But that, of course, also leads to the fact that many of us are not informed about our pension situation, which again might lead to undersaving later on and to having not enough income. The last two topics on the slide for the retirement column is the influence of peer behavior. So studies have found that you're much more likely to inform yourselves or going to a retirement information fair when your colleagues are also doing that. And that framing is also very important for example, the products that you're using at retirement. So a lifelong income product, for example, is much more preferential to you when it's framed in terms of consumption rather than when it's framed in terms of investments. Now, looking at donations, some might even think that we are giving away our own money even is against the self-interest assumption of the Homo economicus, but we're also getting welfare from that, so that's another topic. But it shows that people are not only self-interested. But even things that might even seem more irrational than that is that, for example, studies also have found that on average people are more likely to give when they are forced. That's the last point, but when they are forced because the fundraiser is basically in front of them. So they're much more likely to not say, okay, I'm not going to give, when they have the chance to ditch the fundraiser. That's the social pressure point here. But people are also more likely to give when the fundraiser is beautiful. And that, of course, has nothing to do with the actual donation part. So when we now digging deeper into what I've done in my thesis, the first field of gold is the pension field. And many other studies before us have already shown that financial literacy and pension awareness is low in many, many countries. We are, of course, looking at the Netherlands, but also there it's quite low. Why is that an issue? Well, we're using this decision states model that's shown here on the slide to show why that might be a problem. So basically, this model assumes that we are all at one of these states, basically, and we can move from one state to the next, but we don't have to. So probably we all at one point in our life were very unaware that there might be a potential savings gap. Maybe we heard then from media or lecturers, or we read about them, that there is a potential savings gap, so we became aware of them. Then that might have triggered you to look up your personal pension information. Maybe that triggered you again to try to find out how you can do something about it, so you try to find out how your pension plan works and how the system works. And then last but not least, you might decide to save more, save less, or not change anything at all about your savings. So what we are doing in chapter 2 is we are trying to trigger people to look up personal pension information. And then when they've done so, we're trying to find out whether that actually increased pension knowledge and pension savings. And as a last research question, we're also trying to look at whether these effects depend or vary on participants' characteristics. So we have partnered with the Pensioenfonds Detailhandel, which is the Dutch pension fund for the retail sector. And we sent out letters twice, once in December 2015 and once in May 2018. And we sent that to approximately 250,000 active participants, so the participants that at the time were actively contributing to the pension funds because they're working in the retail sector. The letters told the people that there is a personal account and that they can look at their personal pension information there. So we have, for both of these studies, we have characteristics of the participants, at least to the extent that the pension fund has the information on them. And we also have information on the activities of the participants on the website once they have logged in. And after the second study, we also sent out a survey 3 weeks afterwards to get to measure of pension knowledge and self-reported savings behavior. So this is just well, for you to see how the pension website or the personal account, once you logged in, looked, at least in 2016. And what we are especially interested in is whether people click on the Mein Planner tile. Because that's where the information is of how much salary they're getting now and how much income they can expect later on. So in our first field experiment, we had 6 groups, so 6 letters. One was the control group, which is just the baseline text, where we say, okay, we have this account where you can log in, and then you can also find all of your personal pension information. And for the treatments, we added 1 sentence each. And we have 4 peer information treatments. And within these 4 peer information treatments, we have 2x2 design. So we have 2 treatments that look at income as the main goal of retirement saving, versus 2 treatments that focus on savings as the means to achieve the goal of retirement income. And then we have these fear versus hope effects. So we framed the sentences positively or negatively. To give you an example, for the income fear treatment, we added the sentence, a large part of people in the Netherlands think that they will have too low income, while for the saving peer info hope treatment, we added the sentence, a large part of people in the Netherlands think that they will have a too low income. A large part of people in the Netherlands think that they will save enough. That's the hope part and the savings aspect. And for the financial incentives treatment, we wanted to do that to have a comparison with an extrinsic motive of being able to win money. So we just said among everyone who logs in, we are raffling 100 vouchers worth 25 euros. So what do we find? We do not find a positive effect for the peer information treatments compared to the control letter. But we do find a positive effect of the financial incentive treatment. So people in the financial incentive group were 50% more likely to log in and click on the pension planner than the control group. So this started or made us think, and we tried to come up with a financial incentive that works better than the one we had before. So we were interested to see if we take the same amount of money in total and divide it differently, does that make a difference to people? So for example, we have 2 treatment groups where we raffle many but small amounts. We have 1 group where we have many small amounts and 1 large amount. And then we have 2 treatment groups where we have fewer prizes, but where if you win big. And of course, we also have a baseline control letter. So here we now find that people really like the big lotteries where they can win large prizes. So compared to the control group, people in the 2 by 1,000 euro treatment group were 86% more likely to click on the pension planner. So we were also interested in pension knowledge and savings behavior. And if you just look at the descriptives, it seems that people who have looked at the pension planner are also have a higher pension knowledge than people who have not looked at the pension planner. But if we run 2-stage least squares regressions, we find that there's no statistically significant effect. So it seems that people who click on the pension planner already have a higher knowledge anyways. We also find no relationship between looking at the pension planner and savings behavior, and we find little evidence that there is a difference of, for example, whether older people react differently to the letters than younger people. So let's move on to the second field of gold, which is donation behavior. And there's a lot of money in that field as well. So for example, in 2020, more than 320 billion US dollars were donated in the US alone. And we also know that there are thousands of projects on various crowdfunding platforms. So we are interested in the question of how do people choose between charities or beneficiaries. And one can think about two main concepts here. So one, if you give, you want to have a big impact because you're giving to really help people. So this is based on utilitarianism, and people basically give to produce the greatest possible balance of good over bad. So if I give 10 euro to one person and that increases well-being by 50, versus you give 10 euros to another person and that increases well-being by 100, you would give to the second person that with the 100 gain. But what if the second person now is very responsible for their situation? Would you still give to the second person, or would you then prefer to give to the first person? And that's the responsibility part, where people often also give or want to help people who are not responsible for their situation, because that's more fair or more deserved. So to get to the question which of these concepts might be more important, or whether they are both important at all, we are looking at a Dutch TV show called Geld maakt gelukkig, or Money Makes Happy, literally translated. And in this TV show, you have three candidates who all are in financial need and therefore ask for money. The TV show works that for each candidate, there's a little presentation video where the candidate is being presented and the situation is being presented. And afterwards, there's a little questioning with an expert panel of two people that ask the candidate, okay, have you already thought about different or various measures to improve your situation or not, and what have you done? And at the very end of the show, the 100 people in the audience decide each on 100 euro to give to one candidate. So in total, 10,000 euros are distributed each episode. But of course, we don't know why the actual audience members choose to give to the one person. So what we are doing here is we're making use of raters. So we went to the B Lab and had 80 Dutch-speaking students from Maastricht University watch 9 video clips of 3 episodes. So in one video clip, the presentation video was shown and the questioning by the expert panel was shown, so that the raters also had all the information, or the same information that the people in the audience had. And then after each of these video clips, the raters answered some questions. And the clips belonging to one episode were in the same order of the episode, so that there was no, we didn't change the order, but it was the same order as in the episode. But we semi-randomly allocated the episodes between the surveys so that each episode was at least once first, second, or last. And we have ratings on the impact of 100 euro to a candidate, the impact of 10,000 euro to a candidate, and personal control, and some other control variables. So what do we find? If we are ranking the 3 candidates for each episode on impact of 10,000, we have an average statistic of that the candidates who are ranked highest on impact of 10,000 euros, on average receive 44% of the money, while the candidates that ranked lowest on the impact variable received on average 22%. While with personal control, it's the other way around. So if the candidate who was ranked highest received 24% on average, versus the candidate that was ranked lowest received 40%. So we also run regressions, and if we take the results from the regression, we find that a 1 standard deviation increase of impact also leads to an increase of money received by 6.4 percentage points, while if you have personal control goes up by 1 standard deviation, money received goes down by 4.4%. And this relationship holds when we, for example, only include raters who have not viewed the show before, if we use different averaging techniques, if we include the amount requested by candidate as a kind of a focal point, and if we exclude candidates who ask money for someone else, because sometimes there are also candidates who ask money for an organization, for example. So going forward, What do we find and how does it relate to real life? Well, first lesson learned is probably the pension communication is very difficult, and it's especially difficult to change behavior with communication alone. Of course, one can also use very different treatments. For example, if you look at peer information treatments, one could also use treatments that are closer to the fund member, because we just said a large part of people in the Netherlands. You could, of course, also say a large part of people in the retail sector or of your age group, etc. And it's probably also interesting to look at how visualizations and online tools or storytelling might impact savings behavior and pension knowledge as well. Segueing storytelling is also very important within the donation field. So I think charities might want to go onto that direction a bit more. Because in our show, the situation is, of course, very vividly described. So it's also very vividly described how the donation affects the beneficiaries' lives and why the beneficiary deserves the donations. So probably layman people in the studies that have found that effective altruism or more impact value ratings do not have an impact, well, that might be that laymen don't understand the ratings. Maybe that's too abstract. That might be one of the reasons. So I think charities might want to go more into storytelling and learning also from crowdfunding and social media campaigns in there. But of course, it's also still important that the actual beneficiaries' honor and reputation is still put in place. So with that, I would like to give the floor back to the prorector.
Thank you for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Dr. Dirk Broeders, who was the chair of the Assessment Committee and who is a professor of pension finance at this university. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear candidate, congratulations on an excellent thesis. I read it with great pleasure, of course, and I also learned a lot. So that's very good. And I would like to talk to you about Chapter 2, where you show that members of his pension scheme can be activated to look up personal information on their retirement. However, this does not lead to action. And this is, of course, an important finding, and I think it's also great that this is published in the RFS. Well deserved. So my focus, or my question, is on the fact that you focus on the savings gap. More savings for retirement is obviously equivalent to less consumption today. And actually, I think I read in your thesis that 1/4 of the participants already save more for retirement. However, as you know, this is only one of 4 options to increase your retirement benefits. So next to saving more for retirement, one can also work longer. However, I also read in your thesis that 2/3 of the people working in retail actually choose to retire early rather than later. Then one can also think of improving your retirement income from existing assets, something which is not that common in the Netherlands, but you can think of reverse mortgages, which is probably out of scope here. So the only remaining and 4th option is to take more investment risk. But then you also need to be willing to accept the consequences of that. Based on your research, what do you think about the members? Are they more interested and also more willing to take action if you offer them investment choices? Assuming that these investment choices are offered in an easy to understand manner. Thank you.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, well, thank you for your kind words and your question. So just to make sure I understand the question correctly. So you're basically asking whether you think whether I think that the fund members might be willing to take investment risks as one of the 4 options. Is that right? Okay. From what I know of them. Well, so our fund members compared to the Dutch population, they are more female. A lot of them work more part-time. And there's also a varying, I think there's a 25% change every year of population. So that makes me think that they might not be willing to take more investment risk. because we know from the literature at least that women are more likely to be risk averse, for example. Maybe if they have a partner, maybe that is where the investment risk is coming though. Well, it might very much depend on their situation, I think, because if they have a partner and the partners, that there's no or very low investment risk and they see their assets as a household portfolio, I guess you could maybe go then in the take more investment risk here or not. There's of course also a study that was related, at least also with or we've also done that, or that was done with the same population on sustainability and investment. And I think the study found that people also liked sustainable investments, even if that means that their money goes down. So, well, how does that relate to taking on more investment risks? It might mean that they are it might mean that they are also more innovative, so maybe they would like to take more investment risk. But you mean as the whole fund member population?
We're getting somewhere, so maybe help you a little bit. So they seem to be triggered by the lottery effect, impact. Yeah. So maybe they are triggered by taking risks.
Maybe, yeah.
So maybe you can connect it to the fact that they are triggered by a lottery.
Well, in that case, there might be. But the thing is, we don't have, I'm getting too hung up on comparing them to the Dutch population. But so it seems that they are liking the big lotteries with very few chances to win. We also know from the literature that people generally overestimate winning, or the chances of winning in the lottery. So in that sense, maybe they would like to, or they are willing to take on more risk. That could be. But I think, I think taking on a lottery of winning something when you're just, in the end you only have to log into a thing, to an account, that's probably also very different from actually investing your retirement income. So it might be that they are willing to take on investment risks, but I would be, wary to just say that. So if I were the fund member or in the board, I would probably do more research and try to find out what people actually think about investments.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Marieke Knoef, who was a member of the assessment committee and who is Professor of Empirical Microeconomics at Tilburg University.
Thanks. So, dear candidates, first want to congratulate you with your thesis. It was very interesting to read. And what I also like is this combination that the results are both scientifically interesting, but also interesting for practice. And I would like to ask a question about chapter 3. And what I really like about this chapter is your data collection. It's unique data. You use the data from TV shows. And you also ask students to rate the cases in these TV shows. And I have a question about the generalizability of the results. So these students, they are rating these cases. And I'm wondering, these students are a bit of a special group of people who are not representative for the general population. So that was something I was wondering, how could this have an effect on your results? And secondly, in this chapter, you also provide some policy implications. And you say, now the results can be used by fundraisers. And I was wondering whether the decision-making environment is maybe too different. So when I consider myself walking in the shopping street and these people come to me asking, like, do you want to donate to a certain charity, then I'm not really going into the details about the information. And even also when I get a letter at home, now there are so many things to do at home that now I'm not investigating this information so much as your students did. So that are the questions I'm interested in.
Yeah. So, dear highly esteemed opponent, well, thank you again for your very kind words and, well, nice comments on my thesis. On the generalizability, of course, the student raters, and we also know that from other stories that, you know, they are, of course, students are different from the general population. In this study, you would need to compare them to the Dutch population because, well, people in the audience also were from the Netherlands. So at least we have that one right. So the question, of course, is whether these students, to which questions would it be different of why these students would be different in thinking about impact and personal control other than the Dutch population or people in the audience. We tried, with the way we phrased our questions, we tried that, of course, personal political views, for example, because that's, of course, also important related to personal control, because we also know that, for example, people who think that unemployed people or poor people in general are more responsible for their situations are also more likely to say we don't, as a society we do not have to help them. So if we think that is an issue with our question, then it might be that if we have a lot of students from the SBE, which might also be more conservative in that regard, that might be an issue. On the other hand, we are mainly interested, and that's also why we are using the way we are averaging our, the technique we are using to standardize our questions. It's because we are interested in the difference between the candidates. So if we think that the differences between the candidates are not reliant on, or are not different between students and the general population, then we would not have an issue with that. So that might be a good thing. And then, of course, the situation that we are interested here in is basically you have different, you're actively thinking, okay, I want to donate to which charity or to whom do I want to give my money. That is of course different to when you're just shopping and there are fundraisers in the street, or the example that I gave at the very beginning of my presentation. That is of course different to what we're doing in our study. But on the other hand, so I think our study, or the findings of our study, are mainly important for charities who have with big campaigns. So it's mainly about communicating again what is important for, or why it is important to donate to this charity. Because of course there are a lot of different factors that are just influencing donation behavior and to whom you're giving. Yeah. So.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Diego Geraldes, who is an assistant professor in in behavioral and experiential economics at the University College Dublin. The floor is yours.
Dear candidate, first of all, also allow me to congratulate on this very nice thesis. The research questions that you raise are very pertinent, and your efforts to address them deserves, in my point of view, a big compliment. My question relates to chapter 2. So you find that peer information interventions are ineffective to motivate people to look up pension information, but financial incentives work. More specifically, you uncover the interesting result that a few large financial incentives are more effective to increase pension information search than many small incentives, which, by the way, I think you could have very cool applications in other settings. At the first glance, this is good news. However, you also find that increased pension information search does not translate to increased pension knowledge nor self-reported savings, right? So if we look at your results from a backwards induction perspective, it's fair to say that no policymaker would be interested in implementing such intervention, as ultimately it does not increase saving behavior. This said, as an experimental and behavioral economist, I'm actually pretty convinced that one can use financial incentives to encourage saving behavior. So my question to you is, if you were to rerun your study 2 in chapter 2, could you think of a different financial incentive that could be effective in increasing savings?
Dear esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words and your question. So first of all, I think the pension fund boards are actually still interested in finding that people are going online and looking at the information. But you want to increase savings behavior specifically. So if I would rerun study 2, I assume, do I only use letters, or can I also use financial incentives for something else?
I would keep that you could just send the letters, because besides the policymaker, in the introduction of your chapter, you well motivated that the main goal you were planning to design your interventions, it's ultimately to lead a nudge for people to increase their savings, right? But use your creativity as you've...
Yeah. I mean, in the end, letters can say a lot of things. So if I would want to increase savings, and we allude to that a little bit in our discussion and conclusion, I think, because you can, of course, use financial incentives for a lot of things, not only to say, okay, we want to have people on the personal pension platform.
I'll give you a hint. Let's assume that increase of knowledge, that it's the first step, it's true, okay?
That's true.
So if that's the case, could you think on an idea of how you would design your incentives so that this leads to an increased on savings behavior?
Well, okay. I mean, it depends on how many things I can change, because I think what one main thing is with savings, and I think that alludes to already what Marika said. Of course, in everyday life, people are very busy, and if they're just reading letters, and even if they go to the website and they increase their pension knowledge, that still might not lead to them saving more. So I think, or changing savings behavior in general. So one thing, of course, is that if we could change the website, though we would also need to change the pension plan, because in the retails, in this specific pension plan, people cannot save for the pension plan. But of course, if you can change the website and make it more easier for people to save, I think that would be one thing, so that it's easier for people to also change, even when they go on the website, they see their personal pension information, because on the website there's also a lot of information on the pension plan, so they're becoming more knowledgeable, as you said. If we then have an easier way to make people being able to change something, other than just having to go to a bank or making another investment account, opening another investment account, that would be one thing. I would not run a lottery saying, okay, among everyone who saves more, we are ruffling 1,000 euros. I think that's from a pension fund board member. I would need to think more about the ethics there, because that seems a bit fishy to me. But also, what does increasing saving mean? In the end, I mean, that's another question. Why do we want that everyone saves more? Yes or no? Because these are a lot of part-timers, so they might not have enough income to save anyways, or to save more than there already are. Of course, poor people are also more likely to have a problem later on in retirement. So there are a lot of things to run here, but yeah, I hope I partly answered.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Professor Dr. Lisa Bruggen, who was a member of the assessment committee and who is professor for financial services, will continue the opposition.
Yes, dear Inka, let me start by congratulating you on a really highly relevant and interesting dissertation. I think your 3 empirical field studies are impressive in terms of the size and also uniqueness of the sample. And I hope also that today you truly enjoy life to the full, which I would not find irrational at all. But let me first challenge you a little bit with a question, and my question refers to chapter 2. In the second study, you find that few larger prizes were more motivating to get participants to look at retirement information than many small prizes or a combination of small and large prizes. Now, in one of my dissertation papers, which I still published under my maiden name Deutsch in 2004, so almost 20 years ago, I found that lotteries with small prizes but a higher chance of winning are most effective in increasing response rates to online surveys. Now, these findings seem in contrast to your findings, but let me give you some more details. So, in my lottery, I had 10 times 25 euros, and that had a higher response rate to surveys, 35.5% compared to lottery with 5 times 50 lotteries, or raffling a DVD player, which was rather novel back in 2004. So your incentives were to, you have actually shown this. You also included a couple of references, and I checked up, and their incentives vary from 3 euros daily to 10 euros once, or 30 euros yearly up to 200 euros. So I think what I noticed is what we call small and large is very different, and also different in every one of the papers that I checked. And so my first question is, what is it even that we can learn from all of these studies if the incentive structure is so different every time? Now, my second question is, you state in your introduction that really understanding someone's behavior is a difficult undertaking. Yet it seems to me that in a dissertation, which should be challenging, that's something to strive for. And the Brüders already speculated that maybe an underlying mechanism could be that people are triggered by taking risk, but we don't know, because you actually your empirical strategy doesn't really allow to identify what's underlying the empirical findings that you have. But based on your knowledge from the field, I would still like to invite you to reflect on these theoretical mechanisms that could underlie your findings. And the third question was relating also to your proposition on pension communication in its current state that may not be sufficient. As you know, the new pension law has been adopted. The Dutch government is currently developing a TV, radio, print advertising campaign to encourage people to inform themselves about their pension. And I'm curious as to your advice. Should they do that, or rather give out prizes or incentives to get people to inform themselves? I'm looking forward to your response.
Well, dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words and your 3 questions. So I'm just trying to answer them one by one, I think. So on your first question, what can we learn with incentive studies and various different prizes? Well, I would now like to see a meta study using all of these different information, and because one could, of course, also try to come up with some modeling that says, okay, at some point, you don't have to increase prices anymore, you don't have to increase the chances anymore. It might also be very field specific. So you were talking about but you were talking about the response rates for online surveys. We of course have that you have to log in and then get something. So I would really like to see a meta study on what works there. We of course try to, of course 50 euros is also different to 1,000 euros. So that's, we were just really interested in saying, okay, but of course there are limits to prices, also limits to what pension funds are willing to give in lotteries. So that would be my very quick answer to your first question. On your second question, you asked about theoretical mechanisms behind the results of only study 2 or study 1 as well in the second chapter?
As you like.
Okay. Okay, so with study 1 in chapter 2, we of course, we actually started off being way more excited about peer information and than our results now show. And that is mainly because there are so many studies out there that show that you can very easily, but there are many studies that show that it's very effective to use peer information. Of course, we didn't want to lie, so it's also difficult to come up with a good peer information treatment if you don't have information of how many people are logging in, because this was in 2016 or 15. This was also a new website, so we didn't have information of how many people log in and look at the information. So our theoretical mechanism there, and that's also what we are, of course, writing in our discussion section, is that maybe the peer information we used wasn't effective enough because it wasn't close enough, etc. So I think there's still value in using peer information treatments, but I think there's a bigger caveat than that. With fear and hope, our theoretical mechanism was, there are studies that say that negative emotions are, fear is a very high motivator, but in a field like pensions, where there's already pension anxiety out there, maybe you don't want to shock people into being too scared. So that's why we were also interested in the hope one. We didn't find a difference there, so maybe, though, the peer information effect was too large in that sense. And then, with the financial incentive, of course, that was also a comment we got, because we're talking about finance, we're talking about pensions, we're talking about income, so that's all money related, and we're using lotteries that also uses neuroscience. So maybe people are already in the sphere of money, and maybe that's why also the lotteries do so well in our studies. The theoretical mechanisms underpinning study 2 is, as I said previously, I think people are underestimating their chances of winning. And then, of course, it's very nice if you imagine yourself winning 1,000 euros. That's, of course, a lot more nicer than imagining yourself winning 10 euros. And then on your third question, so with the new pension law, and the government is doing a radio print, or is thinking about a radio print. So there are two, there are more than two, but there are several factors for that, because of course the government also has there are some ethical concerns, of course, that the government also has to put out information and has to inform people. But of course, if the government also spends money, you want to have that the communication campaign is effective. That's the two concerns. So my question would be, what is this? I think I need more information on the actual campaign or what they are doing to have a final say about whether that makes sense. But generally, I think, of course, you need to inform people about what the changes are going to be, because they are quite huge, right? I mean, basically, you're changing from a defined benefit to a DC scheme. From what I understand about the reform, though, it's also a lot on the pension fund, that the pension funds, together with the labor unions, etc., are deciding on how the new system actually will look like, because they can choose, right? So I think I need more information about what this campaign actually says, because if they're just saying, wait for more information from the pension fund, then that might be a waste of money. But yeah, I think I need more information to fully answer that.
Thank you. Dr. Peram Zhao, who will continue the opposition, and he's an associate professor in finance at this university. The floor goes to Dr. Zhao.
All right. Dear candidate, dear Inka, I would like to first congratulate you on this excellent thesis. And I really enjoyed reading it, and it's an amazing achievement to have one of the chapters already published in one of the top journals in our field before it's published in this thesis book, right? So that's amazing for our field. And I would like to bring your attention back to chapter 3, and my question is surrounding the generalizability of your main result, that people care about impact in their giving decisions. I will elaborate my questions from the following two aspects. The first aspect is regarding the setting that you use for this field study, which is this TV show. And I call this giving decision because it's quite different from charitable donation or giving in other settings. And in particular, I mean, you talked about or you discussed some of the differences in your discussion, section 3.6, but there are some more important aspects you didn't address. For instance, in this TV show, the situation, people are giving or allocating for others. It's not their own money. And secondly, for instance, all of the beneficiaries have a target amount, which is not necessarily true in real-world charities. And also importantly, these people making allocation decisions, they're making ternary choices every time, which means that they choose between or among 3 candidates. And to some extent, you should include this screenshot from the TV show in the chapter, because that also gave me more information. When people are making these ternary choices, facing these 3 candidates, each demonstrating their own target amount, what I thought was that, the amount they add up was less than 10,000. So there must be also some strategic reasons for people to allocate differently. And the second part of my question is regarding the concept of impact. How would you define impact? From reading the chapter, I understand that the way you communicate this concept to your student subjects is by saying the word well-being. But one of the major lessons we learn from behavioral economics is that people don't understand well-being for themselves. How can we ask them to evaluate well-being for others? And in this situation, when they're not sure, would it be possible that they use some heuristic measures of impact? For instance, one of the things that's very easy to use in this setting is the percentage of the target that's achieved. Do you find or do you think that your subjects use this heuristic when making their judgments? And how would that also influence the generalizability of your results? Thank you.
Dear esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words and your 2 main questions. So your first question was on generalizability, and with a sub-question on the first one part was the giving decision is very different from what other people do, mainly because it's not their own money. And the beneficiary gives a target amount, which normally you don't have. Of course, that might, that is it again similar to how I answered to Marike's point. That is different from what you have in the feed when it's not a TV show. So again, how we see the setting of our study is that people are sitting down and deciding on, okay, which charities, where do I want to give my money? So with the own money, there's no way around. That is, of course, just very different. Do I have a theory about whether that makes our results? I'm not sure it would change the results that much, because the consequences of the decision are, of course, very high. So the audience members still have a very consequential decision. It's not their money, yes, but it's still 100 euro for one candidate, less or more. With the target amount, so that's also, of course, in a real study you don't have, or in real life you don't have a, well, that also depends on the charity and the campaign. So I just recently, for example, participated in a campaign where there was a target amount set for everyone. So for crowdfunding platforms, for example, you often have a target amount. And then there you actually see how much of the target amount has already been achieved. So that's, of course, different because in this study, the audience decides at the same time. So that also comes back with the heuristic of the percentage of target achieved because the audience doesn't know. So the way it works in the TV show is that they are voting, and then with the big bam, they see how much each candidate receives. So in that sense, neither the audience members, they basically have to assume how much money they think the other audience members are giving to one candidate to really have a theory about how much their €100 will make an impact or not. And therefore, now coming already to your second question with the heuristic, so people in the B lab also we didn't show them how much money each candidate gets. So of course, they do know what the candidate asked. So if they think the candidate has assumed correctly the amount of money the candidate needs, that might be a hint. But we also chose to not play around with that because the audience members also have the same information. So we wanted for the B lab, we wanted to have the same information on the candidates as the audience member have. That's why we decided on that. On the framing of well-being, we thought very hard about how we frame that question. We also thought about satisfaction, but we wanted to be close to utilitarianism and that theory, and they often use, utility, and then it's more well-being that they use. So that's why we chose well-being.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Stefan Straatmans, who is an associate professor in banking and finance at this university. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Prorector. Dear Inka, now, as last in the row, I want to join my predecessors, first of all, to praise your work. It's written in a very enjoyable, accessible style, and it addresses timely issues in behavioral finance. Now, as a non-behavioral oriented economist, I'm a bit outside the field, I learned a lot while reading through your thesis chapters. However, some questions, of course, inevitably popped up, and my first question also goes back, maybe non-surprisingly, to your chapter 2, on A Fistful of Dollars. Now, I guess that does not refer to a spaghetti western, the title, but to the different financial incentive schemes whose impact you measure, on whether people consult their own personal pension information more after being incentivized. And you also look into whether offering them specific peer information leads to a higher attention to own personal pension information. Now, you do find an effect for the incentive schemes, but not for the peer information. And moreover, you do not find that showing more interest in pension information leads to a higher literacy in terms of pensions and impact on retirement savings. Okay, so this is a bit of a mixed set of results, which is fine, because that is what this science about. And then at the end of chapter 2, you speculate a little bit about what might be the cause of these results and what may be future avenues of research. And one of the things you mention that triggered my attention is that the data that you use are Dutch. And this lack of impact of pension communication on pension literacy and savings, you say, might be due to the fact that the need for retirement information is lower in the Netherlands, because the quality of the system, of the pension system, is so high. And you refer for that to a country ranking that has been made, and it seems that the Netherlands or the Dutch pension system was on top of that ranking. Now, I was first of all wondering whether you can tell me a little bit more about the criteria that have been used for making this ranking, and does that also imply, given that people already have this high quality of information as an initial condition, that they also have a high pension literacy as an initial condition before you start treating them? And related to that, is there something like just like you refer to this country ranking on pension system quality, is there also something like a country ranking on pension literacy? And is the Netherlands also on top of that? So it's more like that I ask you to speculate a little bit about it. It's not really inside the chapter, but I was interested in, these questions popped up in my mind.
Yeah. Dear esteemed opponent, thank you again for your kind words. So I assume you're referring to the Mercer pension index. So this is a pension index that's being published every year. The Netherlands is not number one anymore, I believe, but at the time of writing it was. But it's still very highly ranked. So pension communication is in there. So what Mercer is doing is they, with their huge consultant army in various countries, they are, and information mainly by, or often by the OECD, they use that information to, well, it's an index. So they have 3 different parts. One is adequacy of their pension income, one is sustainability, and one is governance, I believe it's called. So I think pension communication is under the governance part. I'm not 100% sure how the ranking is for the whether in the year we used, but the Netherlands is always very good in all of the 3 rankings. Well, the need for information, that comment that you were basing on your question on, that's now also, of course, changing with the pension reform. Some people argue that in a DB scheme you don't need to communicate that much with pension fund members. I would not agree with that, but of course there's less downturn to that. So I talked about pension communication. So pension communication is in the governance aspect, I believe. Is pension literacy in there? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure on what I'm supposed to speculate there.
That's about the ranking that you are still talking about. So, but you use the variable pension literacy in your regressions as left-hand side variable. Wasn't that the case?
For on pension knowledge, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Pension knowledge.
Well,
yeah. I call this pension literacy. So this variable should also exist for other countries than the Netherlands. So you get it from somewhere, and then there should exist a ranking of that. Does that ranking? Is that ranking correlated 1-to-1 with the ranking of the pension system qualities of the countries? Or I expected they should be closely related. That was basically my question.
So the thing is, the pension knowledge measure that we are using, we partially made up for our study in the survey, because we are using questions that other studies have used, but it's not like the financial literacy big 3 or big 5 questions. It's not a it's not a measure that's out there that much. Okay. Because the pension knowledge questions, for example, there are 2 questions in there that are that are specific to the fund. So we're asking, for example, whether the pension was indexed in the last year. We're asking whether people can choose their investments. So that's fund specific. Of course, it's a yes or no. So in that sense, you can ask these questions in various countries. So I'm supposed to speculate on whether the Netherlands is topped there as well. I'm not sure. I mean, generally financial literacy is low everywhere. And I don't think pension knowledge it's that much different. So the ranking.
Does the quality of the pension system have an effect also on the level of financial, or more specifically pension literacy in the country? That is what you then expect. If people don't have the need to gather additional information, does that mean that they are more literate than in other countries? That was basically the heart of the speculation I asked about.
So I think what we meant with there was, because at least at the time of writing, the Netherlands still had a DB scheme. Some people argue that there's less need for information in the sense because people can't change things. So if you compare, for example, with Australia, they can, fund members there can change all of the investments. They can really add more contributions or not. So there's a lot of things that people can do there. So if you relate need for information to how much you can do, Within the pension fund, then that's something. Then the Netherlands ranks relatively low in that sense, at least until now. So that might change. That was why we have this need for information might be low in the Netherlands compared to others. Pension awareness is also low in the Netherlands. So in that sense, I assume that pension literacy is also low in the Netherlands. How it's compared to other countries, it might be lower, but I'm not.
Future work.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for your last response. Inka Eberhardt, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. And the degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. And I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. All your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Inka Eberhardt, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense, and in view of its positive verdict, and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Bauer is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. Professor Smeets will do the laudatio, and I invite your supervisor now to take the floor.
Please, all rise.
Inka, ik ga het in het Nederlands doen. Met jouw geweldige talenkennis en vooral de Nederlandse, vind ik, moet dit moment gewoon in het Nederlands. Belooft u dat u altijd volgens de beginselen van wetenschappelijke integriteit te werk zult gaan? Eerlijk en zorgvuldig, transparant, onafhankelijk en verantwoordelijk.
Ja, dat beleef ik.
Krachtens de bevoegdheid ons door de wet toegekend, volgens het besluit van de commissie hier tegenwoordig, verklaar ik hierbij u, Inka Eberhardt, tot dokter te bevorderen en alle rechten te verlenen die daaraan volgens wet en gewoonte zijn verbonden. Ten bewijze hiervan overhandig ik u de bul, door rector, secretaris en de overige leden van de promotiecommissie ondertekend en met het grootzegel van de universiteit bevestigd.
Ja, liebe Inka, dann mache ich das mal auf Deutsch. Also zuerst mal möchte ich Ihnen und Ihre Familien gratulieren zu dieser schönen Leistung. Jetzt gehe ich wieder nach Englisch. Dann haben wir alles gehabt heute. So, Rob and I, we met you actually on a glowing recommendation from your sister. So Rob and I, we had just started this cooperation with Pensioenfonds Detailhandel. We were looking for a PhD student, and by that time, Wiebke was already present, and said to us, and I never forgot that, yeah, you really have to invite Inka over, because she has even more brains than I do. So, yeah, with such a glowing recommendation, yeah, what can you do? You have to invite Inka, of course. So we did that, and then Rob and I were walking with Inka through the city and finding a place for coffee, which was the VND. And in contrast to Inka's dissertation, yeah, the VND was a bit of a lukewarm brew. So Inka impressed us more than the VND, so we decided to hire her. And well, that was really the start of a big adventure. And now, when I was thinking about, okay, what can you say about Inka, then it's a bit of a mystery, right? So Inka is a bit of a mystery, but I actually found a lot of informants that gave me some nice insights. I will come back to those sneaky spies later. So I'm first going to share a couple of successes that I personally witnessed. And I think the first of those successes is the fact that Inka made it to the Western Finance Association. So this is a top conference in finance, and not many PhDs actually find their way there. But there was Inka on Coronado. That's a sun-soaked island next to San Diego. Among all the hotshots, Inka presented her work. That was already a big achievement. And then that resulting chapter, A Fistful of Dollars, was published in the Review of Financial Studies, which you rarely see, like also Professor Zhao already mentioned today, during the PhD. And that all in sometimes not easy times for Inka. And I think this really shows your resilience to pull that off. And that's really, really impressive. But there was more. There was Harvard. So Inka was going abroad for a visit, and then, where would I go? Let's just go to Harvard. So she came to me, well, that would be great. So I dialed up Michael Norton, John Bashirs, and without hesitation, they wanted to host Inka. It took a few forms, visas, and all of that stuff, but then finally there she was, Inka in Cambridge with the crème de la crème of research. And then Inka came back, so I asked, okay, Inka, how was it? And then she brushed off, yeah, it was okay. Typical Inka style, was okay. But actually then I heard back from the colleagues from Harvard, they were really taken by Inka, and I could also witness her great growth when she came back. And then the third one, and that's where Inka really knocked our socks off, that was the science slam. Because just picture the science slam as a theater, and you have 10 minutes to pitch your research in an engaging way with a bit entertainment in front of a jury and audience, not really Inka's cup of tea. But she said, yeah, I do it anyway. And there she was, like, presenting really outstandingly with a lot of charisma. So that's something that I very vividly remember. So, yeah, I have a lot of big pieces, so that takes a lot of time before I'm at the next one. Because now I actually get to my clandestine spies. And I asked them how to describe Inka. So just here a couple of words how people describe Inka. So first of all, generous, a deep sense of justice. In Dutch we say nuchter or sober-mindedness. And then her sense of humor, as dry as the best martini you have ever had. And just to top that off, the cherry is a dash of wokeness. I'm not saying that. That's how your friends describe you. I'm just okay. But from there, we then now dive into the more rich personal life that Inka always tries to hide from us. And you really have to hold on tight for this one, because this is going to be an international ride. And we start with a salsa spin on the dance floor with a Spaniard. But actually, Spaniard, yeah, maybe not. Let's just go for an Italian gentleman who caught her fancy. But also that didn't last for very long. So then she decided, maybe it's better to have a German anyway. But then not a German, of course, just taking the Autobahn and driving to Germany. No, she takes the jet, and then she flies to Australia and finds him there. So that's Inka style, right? So I wish you, Inka, together with Munir, as much adventure as also the adventure you had to get together. And that just leaves me to say I'm really proud of you. Congratulations on behalf of Rob and me. Cheers. Thank you.
Dear Dr. Eberhardt, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you, your family, friends, and supervisors with the degree you have acquired, and I would like to thank the members of the degree committee for their contribution. Before closing the session, we would like to take some pictures with you on the stairway in the larger hall. Later on there will be a reception at the rafter, and I would like to ask the audience to give us room to move to the stairway. I close this session.